guys, welcome to the webinar. I'm Guillaume Boisvert, the Director of Webinars, and I'll be joined today by David Meister, the Global Head of Channel and MSP for Checkpoint, formerly Avanan. Today we'll be talking about modern email security. Thanks for joining us. Very, very excited about this presentation today because it's something that we've been waiting for a long time. Just a couple of housekeeping items. The webinar is recorded. You will receive a link in the next couple of business days. If you have to missed any part of it, or if it's so good that you want to watch it again, it will be in your inbox. If you have questions, the software has a section for questions. We love questions. We may either answer them as we go or wait to the end. There's a Q&A section. If any questions are not getting answered during the presentation, don't worry, we'll contact you directly and give you a sort of a private answer. Sometimes a question are not necessarily appropriate for the whole group, but generally we try to answer everything. Today we'll talk a little bit about just cybersecurity and email in general, like what to think about when you're talking about email security. Then we'll give most of the time to our friends from Checkpoint to explain their solution. I'll give you some details of what it means to acquire Harmony Email and Collaboration, formerly Avanan, at Sherweb, and then what are the next steps. So maybe one of the quick bits of clarification, and I think that's a question you get a lot, probably David, is, so what is the difference between, and I know I'm a bit off script already, and this is probably a record like 30 seconds in, but just for our partners that are here, like what's the difference between Avanan and Checkpoint Harmony Email and Collaboration?
Yeah, great question. It is something that comes up a lot. So Checkpoint and Harmony Email and Collaboration are the same thing. They're the same product. It's the same technology. The difference is that Avanan was acquired by Checkpoint almost 4 years ago now. And it's been a great acquisition, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on, about some of the benefits. But in the MSP landscape, Checkpoint is known as an enterprise company, whereas Avanan had more of a name that people knew about. So whereas the enterprise part of our business has really adopted the name very quickly, we've been a bit slower to adopt the Checkpoint name in the MSP space, just because there's a bit of brand equity behind the Avanan brand. So it's the exact same product. The way we designed our MSP program is that the product that we use with a 2-person MSP is the exact same product, exact same security that we use with a Fortune 50 company.
Great. So I think that was worth clarifying just sort of before we start, so that there's no sort of confusion for anybody. Now I'd like to ask you a little bit about email security, and I'm going to put I'm going to remove my thinking hat, ask you a bit of a simple question, but email's been around forever. Email security has been around for almost as long. Isn't it like sort of a figured out problem? Like, why are we still talking about email security? Like, is this still relevant?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right. It's been around for a long time. It's email security has been around almost as long as email, but it still continues to be the number one attack vector. We still see most organizations that are breached by business email compromise and by different email attacks. And there's a couple of key drivers that have been pushing it forward. The first one is over the last 10 years, or less actually, over the last 8 years, we've seen a massive migration away from on-premise mail to 365. So the architecture of how we use email has changed, and that's been a big driver. But then in the last 2 years particularly, the introduction of artificial intelligence and large language models has been a big reason why we've seen an increase in the number of attacks and the sophistication of attacks. And so kind of the way that I think about it is that picking a phishing email 4 years ago, if it was a phishing email coming out of, let's say, Pakistan or Iran or China, let's say, you could generally pick it based off the language. But with the introduction of ChatGPT, of DeepSeek, as of a few days ago, you can now go and create emails that are intended to phish people, but you don't have to have good English. You don't have to be overly intelligent. They can do it on your behalf. So being able to pick those types of attacks is becoming increasingly difficult.
One other thing that I find interesting is we obviously, like, I think both of us, but definitely I follow like security news and things like that, and people are very excited about like a new vulnerability in things or new way to crack things. And when you actually read the detail, like so often they gain a foothold by somebody clicked a link in an email or opened an attachment, and then there's a fancy new attack that happened. But still such a common sort of entry point to the environment of clients and victims for cybersecurity. Like still very much sort of a critical vector. It's kind of crazy.
It
Um,
it it is, and it's one of those things for MSPs that, I mean, I come from an MSP background myself, both technical and sales, and I've run MSPs. And email security is just one of those things that it has been around for so long that the assumption is that email security works well. And so when somebody gets phished, it's probably one of the quickest ways to lose clients and to lose trust from, particularly from the executive team. Like if it's a hundreds person organization and it's CFO who's signing the checks and the CEO goes and gets phished, they're going to go straight to the MSP. It's just such a quick way to lose customers if you don't get it right.
yeah, and that's sort of the extreme end of it, meaning like when the worst happens. But even just like the complaint rates and the amount of time that you have to deal with somebody saying like, "Oh, I'm getting this spam or that spam," like there's quite a bit of a operational efficiency to be had with the right email solution, and then the other way around with the wrong one. Like it's a surprisingly impactful product in your stack around your ability to have your tech work on something that earns you money rather than just be answering question about like why are they getting this garbage email or that garbage email.
That's exactly right. And as the architecture has become more complicated with 365, the amount of time that the tech spend is increasing. I mean, something that I'll give you two really simple examples from when I was working at an MSP. Uh, when then a malicious email got through to an end user and needing to get the original copy of the email so you can investigate the header, the amount of time people would spend, like techs would spend on that, was really frustrating. But then on the other side, if a user would call up and report, hey, I'm supposed to receive this email, I've never received it, I didn't get a report from the email security tool or it's the Daily Digest, and then needing to jump between Defender and the gateway and anything else that's in the architecture or the flow of mail to figure out where it's been stopped. It's so easy to waste hours and hours on simple requests.
Yeah, with very low value as well, like to that work, like compared to project work or anything like that. I think you touched on it, like, and it was a very fair point that, well, yeah, I can't turn it into a question so much, but as a comment, like you touched on the change of architecture of things and sort of our sort of tendency to use the old ways with that new architecture. I think that's a key point. Like as things progress and change, relying on the old technology, old architecture when you're doing new things in a new sort of setup is usually where you get kind of caught, and you're so used to doing things that take a certain time and require a certain amount of effort. Like sometimes the vision on optimization is not as clear for MSP, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And even simple things that you start to build in. It's not just around the expectation, but the way that you build your cost centers around doing it. Like you take professional services as an example, and a deployment of an email security solution. If you're using a gateway and you have been for the last 20 years, you know how many hours it's going to take you to do an MX record change, how many hours it's going to take you to set up or import and export, allow and block lists. You just bake that time in, and people just start doing MSPs. We just get used to that. But there are newer ways of doing it where you don't have to spend that type of time.
Well, this transitioned us, I think, nicely into fine. I think the people that are here don't need to be lectured on having an interest in new things because they're here. So clearly they do. I hope everybody appreciate the co-pilot created the image there. That's a conversation that we've had often with partners, and I'm kind of curious your point of view. Like, and I think everybody understand you'll be a little bit biased, but like without getting into the specifics of a solution, like what are the key components to a modern email security solution? Like what is the difference between a good one and sort of a generic one? Because let's be honest, the market's pretty busy. Like there are a number of solutions out there. So if you put yourself in the shoes of an MSP, which shouldn't be hard for you, um, what would you put at the top of the list of things to sort of validate and confirm?
So there's a couple of key things that I would look for with an email security tool. The first thing that I would look for is the ease of use and ease of setup. That for an MSP, that's really, really important. If something's going to take you 60 clicks and 3 hours to set up, and you have to do a change request after hours to deploy it, it makes it so much harder to become profitable. And also for your engineers, if they are in disparate dashboards, particularly needing to jump between Microsoft Defender and whatever your email security dashboard is, trying to have something that's a lot simpler and unified is really important because there's just so much time to be wasted. So that's from a management point of view. From a security point of view, you want to look at something, and I know the word gets used a lot, but you want to look at something that is using AI, particularly large language models. The reason that is so critical is that legacy or traditional email security, the way that it worked is it would look for it would look at the headers, it would look at the IP addresses it was coming from, it would look for specific malicious things, but DKIM, DMARC, and SPF, those types of things. But we see now where people are creating phishing emails that are coming from Gmail or from Outlook.com, as an example, and the emails may not necessarily be malicious straight away. But they might become malicious. So being able to use a tool that can use AI and large language models to analyze the intent and the language being used in the body of an email is really, really important. Because I think it was in the Verizon breach report from 2024, they raised something called pretexting. And what pretexting is actually where they establish, it's like a precursor to business email compromise, where they will send you an email or maybe a text message or something like that to establish a communication relationship with you before trying to send a malicious payload or a phishing link. Being able to use a tool that can analyze the intent of an email and the body of an email so that it can block it if it can recognize it as a pretexting email that it's going to lead to something malicious rather than waiting for something to malicious to come in is really important. The last thing that I think is critical and a challenge that a lot of organizations have run into, one of the reasons that legacy email security or gateways were so successful is that they prevented things. They stopped them from ever getting to the inbox. And there's a lot of solutions out on the market now that are detection remediation that remove it once it already hits the inbox. To get real, true email security, you need to be able to block something, stop it from ever getting to the inbox, because people have access on their mobiles, on laptops, on iPads, and if you've got to rely on something to pull it out of the inbox once it arrives in those 3 separate locations, you're going to be in trouble.
It's all very interesting. I'll let you talk about more like which of those specific features are present in Avanan and now. I'll have a question for our partners that are listening. One of the things that we are always wondering about, and it's been an issue with some partners for sure as we work with them on their email security, is the control of the DNS. So often talking to vendors is an assumption that the MSP controls the DNS completely, where that's often not the case. That domain name from a company is one of those very sort of precious assets that doesn't generally gets transferred to the MSP. So any email security that has to go through the MX record means often having to go through the end customer to have them make a change to their DNS record. So the question for our partner is very easy. And don't be embarrassed. Like whatever your answer is not a problem. Like we see all kinds, and it's a very common mix. But do you control 100% of the DNS records of your end customers, or do you have to go through them to get change done? So if you just want to put that in you could put it in the QA as an answer. Sometimes we do both and do one today, but that question kind of always intrigues me a little bit. Like, do you have 100% control on the DNS of your clients? Because if you don't, then that's a very different project when you go to deploy one of those solutions, because then you are relying on somebody else to do things for you. And as we know, like when you do email migration or email security migration in the old ways, the timing was very important. Like there was other things to coordinate. All right. So for the main course, I'll pass it over to Dave, who's going to introduce the key features of email collaboration and automated email and collaboration security, formerly called Avanan.
Thank you very much. Well, look, I think the way that I like to go through this, particularly for partners who haven't been introduced to us before, is to kind of take you on a little bit of a journey around the history of email security, and we've touched on it a little bit already. But the way that email security came about is that it was designed for on-prem mail servers. And we take ourselves back 20 years ago, where the mail server was in a server room, hopefully a locked server room, that the IT team had access to. They could go in there on a Friday afternoon, tap it on the head and pray over it that it wasn't going to go down over the weekend. But it was a physical appliance. And to secure it, we had generally like a 1RU device that sat on top of it, which was a secure email gateway. And what would happen is you would change your Exchange record or your MX record. So all the mail flowed to the gateway. The gateway analyzed it based off rules, based off some threat intelligence, generally based off patterns, decide whether it's malicious or not. If it wasn't malicious, it let it go through to the on-prem mail server. This was the architecture for 20 years, and it was the correct architecture. It was the best practice on how to deal with email security. But as we mentioned earlier, the way that we do email now is different. And so we see globally now about 74% of organizations are using cloud-based email for their main email, but not just cloud-based email anymore. Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, some organizations using Box or Google Drive or Slack. And so the way that we've communicated has fundamentally changed. Rather than being that on-prem mail server, it's now sitting somewhere. So the challenge that we run into in 2025 is where most organizations have moved to the cloud. A lot of them are still using that legacy secure email gateway as the way to secure the cloud, and this was the architecture they used for on-prem. Now, this introduces a couple of different challenges. First and foremost, when you change your MX records, you expose what you're using for email security to the outside world. So if you are using I'm not going to mention other vendors, but if you're using another vendor, you can actually do an MX record lookup and see who the organizations are using. This is a big attack vector for malicious actors. But the architecture itself introduces a couple of challenges. Number one is that the secure email gateway sits outside of 365. And what that means is that it's blind to everything that's going on inside of 365. It'll scan the mail as it comes in, make a decision, and then push it into 365. The way that it can do that is one of two ways. One, it'll push it through Defender, which gives an extra layer of security, but then you're managing two portals. Or two, which is more common, is that there will be Mailflow rules to bypass Defender altogether. That means that if somebody gets around a gateway, the most common way we see it happening is by somebody sending an email to an on Microsoft domain. That means that email is going to get straight through to the inbox. But it also isn't just a matter of that email is going to get through to the inbox because that native security is disabled or bypassed. The other problem is that this architecture is designed for inbound email. Sometimes you see organizations set it up for outbound so that the mail will flow out of the gateway as it leaves, but very rarely do you see is doing internal to internal protection, which is a big problem when it comes to business email compromise. And so the challenge that that really delivers for MSPs is this. So the email is the leading threat. According to our threat research, over the last 30 days, about 92% of malicious files were distributed by your email. One out of every 255 email attachments was malicious. One out of every 601 links inside of an email was malicious. And one out of every 275 malicious emails was a sextortion email. And so there's a huge number of threats, and it's relentless that it's coming in. And what that results for MSPs is the amount of time that you spend managing email security is getting higher and higher. We ran a report, or we went and analyzed a number of different organizations, and we saw that on average about 23% of a security analyst's time was being spent managing email security. So this is things like talking to end users, trying to get an original copy of the email to investigate the headers, figuring out whether it had been blocked by Gateway or by Defender, deciding whether the email was malicious or not. So 12.1 minutes, but then that becomes more if you're running multiple portals. And when we went through and we spoke to the users who were, the SOC analysts who were investigating the threats, we found about 69% of the time, one of the key things they had to do was actually go and lock down an account because that account was already compromised. It wasn't just about that stopping that malicious email coming in, but the account itself had already been compromised, and they were able to send threats externally and internally as well. And so this challenge that we're facing isn't just something that we're seeing. This is an entire market that's changing at the moment. So over the last couple of years, the different analysts have been speaking about this. All the way back in 2021, Forrester said that secure email gateways, or SEGs, are slowly becoming dinosaurs. Omdia said that the state of the market's in transition, and even Gartner has called out now that there needs to be a strategic shift in how we secure this communication channel. And the way that a lot of the organizations have gone about this is they're starting to move towards API-based email security. So we've seen a lot of up-and-comers, startups do API-based email security, but we're even seeing some of the legacy players that have been around for 20 plus years, that have been the industry leaders for a long time, try to move away from their gateway MX-based security to API-based email security. But as they've made this migration, they've realized that there's a fundamental flaw to the way that API-based email security works. And we know this ourselves because when we started back in 2016, the way that we worked, we were an API-only email security vendor. And the way that works is you connect into the Microsoft Graph API, the email comes in, it arrives in the inbox, using the Graph API, you grab a copy of it, or using journal records, you grab a copy of it, you then make a decision on whether it's malicious or not, and then using the Graph API, you actually remove it from the inbox. It's a pretty cool technological feat to be able to automate removing the email from the inbox. But the challenge is that the Microsoft Graph API, and Microsoft talks about this openly in their documentation, isn't reliable from a time point of view, which means that an email maybe 8 times out of 10, it might get removed within a couple of seconds. But then you have those instances where it's sitting in the inbox for 10, 15, 20 seconds, sometimes even up to 15 minutes. We've seen in some cases with bigger environments or with emails that have large attachments. And so that's a big risk because the user can click on it. And again, thinking that it's not just about the laptop, but it's about the iPad and it's about the mobile phone as well. There's a lot of different locations that the email has to be removed. And even going beyond the security aspect of it, one of the things that we saw when we were doing this style of email security was that a user would get a pop-up, they'd go to their inbox, and then it wasn't there. And it just frustrated end users. It wasn't a good experience. So this has been a supplemental way to address email security. Now, we know this, and we know so deeply about this because it's the way that we used to do it. When we started as Avanan, we were the first ones to do API-based email security, but we realized very quickly that you couldn't have full security without prevention, and that there was a risk of a user clicking on an email if it's sat inside of the inbox. And more advanced features such as sandboxing, malware emulation, things like that, if you're not in line, you can't stop it. It's going to arrive and then you're going to have to pull it after the fact. So we decided to change the way that we did email security.
Would you say it's fair to say that API-based, it's not that it doesn't work. It will work most of the time. The problem is it's almost guaranteed that at some point it won't.
That's exactly right. And this is why Gartner refers to it as a supplement, is because if you go, and in particular, if you go look in the enterprise, if they're going to run API email security, it's API email security plus a gateway, or API email security plus Microsoft Defender, which then just means you're managing 2 to 3 portals to support your email security. And that problem that I described around needing to investigate, it's expensive, you're right. But that problem I described about needing to find where an email got stopped, it's a nightmare for a SOC team. I mean, I'm gonna say a vendor here, but not a vendor bash. I'm just gonna say this from my experience. The last MSP that I was working at, we used Barracuda, and then we installed Graphis because Barracuda was missing so many phishing emails. And so my tech teams would have to, when they couldn't find an email, would go look in Barracuda, Defender, and Graphis to try and figure out where an email had been stopped. And it was an absolute nightmare. So this experience is being felt amongst the industry. It's being felt amongst MSPs. So we went away and we took about 18 months and we decided there needed to be a new way to do it. So Guillaume, I'll get you to hit next a couple of times. So we're not a secure email gateway. You don't change the MX records to set us up. We don't disable Defender. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But we're also not an API detect and remediate tool that removes the email once it hits the inbox. What we are and what we created is something called inline API. And what that means, and this is a patented approach, What that means is that we've taken the gateway style functionality of being able to stop an email, but we've placed it inline inside of 365 so that out of the box, we're not just doing protection outside of the cloud on inbound, but inside of the 365, we're doing protection on inbound, outbound, and internal emails. And the patent that we released on this, we actually automated the full setup. So it takes about 30 seconds to set up, and then you're straight away getting that protection. So technically you can achieve this manually, but it's going to take you a couple of hours to do. So we're the only ones that can get this inline API set up within a couple of seconds. So we're built on this patented prevention design. Because we're inside 365 in the mail flow, we're hidden from attackers. You can't do an MX record lookup to see that we're there. We can't be bypassed. Out of the box, we're doing inbound, outbound, and internal email protection. And then we're doing prevention, but we also can do post-delivery protection. So for example, if we learn that something is malicious after it's already arrived through a new bit of threat intel, we can actually go remove it from the inbox. Or the more common play is when the CFO has too many drinks on a Thursday night because the finances are struggling and they send an angry email to the sales team. A couple of clicks, we can go rip it out of everybody's inbox. But because we're inside of 365, we're not just protecting email anymore. We saw that 74% of organizations are using email and Teams and OneDrive and SharePoint. So as a part of our licensing, we also are protecting on Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint. So from an MSP point of view, as you replace your legacy gateway, there's so much more value that you can deliver to your customer because there's a complete new vector, such as malicious files and malicious links, data leak and data loss risks inside of Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint that we can now protect in the same tool under the same licensing as we do with email security. Now, we have been an AI-based tool for a number of years. We've been using AI for about 5 years inside of our product, maybe a bit longer. But the key to artificial intelligence in cybersecurity, or in general, is that AI can only ever be as good as the data that it learns from. And so I remember when ChatGPT first came out, it was during COVID, there was a new COVID variant where I was living in Australia at the time. So I decided to go ask ChatGPT, tell me about this new COVID variant. And ChatGPT responded to me and said, I don't know. I stopped ingesting information in 12 months earlier or 6 months earlier, so I don't know. And this was before it could search the web. And so we see that with AI as well. When we were just Avanan, all of our threat intel was based off what we saw on email. But once we got acquired by Checkpoint, we took all of our threat intel and we pushed it into a giant data lake called the Threat Cloud. And the Threat Cloud takes threat intelligence from every single Checkpoint device globally. We're talking about 150,000 networks globally. And then we pointed our AI to learn from that. And I'll talk a bit about this in a moment, but what it allowed us to do was to now see threats across the entire threat landscape and make actions on email based off what we're seeing in the entire threat landscape. The last key thing that I'll mention on this is that we noticed that obviously Microsoft's very, very important. We don't have email without Microsoft unless we use Google, which we can also do the same protection on Google Workspace. But we didn't want MSPs to be managing two portals. And so we created and released a patent in June called the Unified Digest. And what that gave us the ability to do was to actually augment 365, Defender for 365. So when Microsoft says something is clean and it's not, we'll stop it from getting to the inbox. When Microsoft says that something is malicious and it's not, and we think it's clean, we'll actually auto-release it out of Microsoft. If a user is logging in from suspicious locations, if a user has suspicious MFA failures, things like that, you can reset that password and block their account out of Microsoft from our portal. And in fact, you can even set up policies to do that. But the most important thing is that from an end user point of view, they can receive a daily digest that includes all of the malicious emails that Microsoft has blocked, all of the malicious emails that we have blocked, but it's a single digest email, and the policies on whether they can release it or not are based off the policy set in the Avanan portal, meaning that you can control Defender policies from our portal, so you don't need to keep jumping between the two. You have a full defense in depth of 2 layers of security, but fully managed from one.
Yeah, the one control panel thing that you were talking about before, which I think is, you don't realize it until you can have something better. I think, like you were talking about your MSP, you have 3 places to check. You just deal with it. Like you try to make it as fast as possible, but at the end of the day, like what we're kind of saying is you don't have to. Like there are now better, smarter ways to do it.
That's exactly right. I mean, if for example, if you took on Avanan, and even if you just ran a proof of concept or rolled out the NFR, you put it in play, and malicious email comes through, you'll be able to see what Microsoft said about it, whether Microsoft blocked it or whether we blocked it. And then you can actually just view the header of the email directly from our portal rather than getting an original copy of it. So the amount of time you spend investigating, I mean, I think our catch rates, and I might be biased, but I think our catch rate's one of the highest, or if not the highest in the industry. But when you do need to investigate it, it's super simple. And one of the reasons that that catch rate is getting so high now is, as I said, is we're taking all this intelligence from Threat Cloud. So the Checkpoint Threat Cloud does about 86 billion transactions a day, more transactions than Google. Google does about 5.6 billion. And so there's a huge amount of big data. And then in the cloud, there's about 100 different AI engines, about 50 of them being generative AI. I think it's actually a bit higher now. And all of these things are looking at different types of threats, trained to look for different types of threats. And it doesn't matter where the threat comes from, our email security product knows about it. So if you go to the next slide, I'll give you a real world example. A bit of malware came out in 2024, and Checkpoint first picked this up on a firewall in Italy. The information, I'll get you to quick through, Guillaume. The information then got shared with the Threat Cloud. The Threat Cloud then made a decision whether it was malicious or not. And then once it made that decision, it shared that intel with every single Checkpoint product globally within about 2 seconds. So we can have a threat on a firewall, and the threat telemetry, such as the IP address, the hashes on the malware, where it's coming from, what's involved with it, that can be happening in Italy, in Africa, wherever you want. Within a couple of seconds, we can be looking and preventing the same threat via email here in the US or in Canada. So it's really, really powerful. And so I'll give you a real world example. So an email comes in, and we do look for some of the more standard things. So we look at the language, we look if there's a low traffic website. We use large language models to analyze the body of the email to see whether it's malicious or not. And from in our portal, you can actually see, we'll highlight where our AI is saying which part of the email, which words are actually considered malicious. Is there a different send to or reply to email address? What's happening with the brand reputation? I'll just get to it next. But what also we'll look at is 300 plus other indicators to be able to decide whether this is malicious or not. And all of this intel is getting powered by the Threat Cloud. So we'll make that verdict, and then if we find it malicious, we'll prevent it getting through to the end user. By the experience that the end user gets, on whether you want them to be able to release an email, whether you want them specific all people in the organization to, but not others, you can control that all from the portal. So you take all of that together. You take the inline API approach. You take the threat, our mature AI. You take threat intelligence from the Threat Cloud, and what it's resulting in is a very high catch rate compared to our competitors. So we went out and we analyzed about 300 million emails over about a 6-month period to see how many emails we missed compared to our competitors. We weren't perfect. We missed about 10 malicious emails. So hand on heart, when we're not 100% perfect, no cybersecurity vendor is. And if a cybersecurity vendor tells you that they are 100% perfect, I suggest you run for the hills because they're full of it. But compared to our competitors, we were 44 times and sometimes 93 times more effective at stopping those malicious emails. And this is a huge barrier MSPs, because if we stop the right emails and we don't stop the wrong emails, it has a direct correlation to the amount of time you need to spend and a direct correlation to the profitability of you providing a service. And so we work with a number of MSPs that the feedback was, hey, we moved away from this gateway. I spend 90% less time on email security, 95% less time on email security than I did a few weeks ago. And so in a summary, that's kind of where we sit. We are one of the market leaders in email security. We're the only API solution that can prevent. We're not just protecting mail, but Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Box, Dropbox, Citrix, ShareFile, Google Drive. You can tell I've said that a few times. As a part of the licensing, and it's full security. It's not just phishing, it's malware, DLP, encryption, content disarm and reconstruction, options for DMARC, security awareness training is coming shortly. So it is a full email security, and particularly when you look at DLP, it's not just for the email, but Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint as well. We fully augment 365, so you're not having to jump between portals. We're powered by the Threat Cloud. But we're also now seeing and have the evidence for your customers to feel comfortable with the product. There has been 7 different analyst reports in the last 2 years about email security, and we are the only vendor to be ranked as a leader by all 7. So the playbook. When it comes to MSPs, there's always 3 things we focus on. We focus on reducing risk by stopping the right emails and not stopping the wrong emails. That's going to lead to a reduction in time and increase your profitability. But the third one, and here's a really hard truth about email security, for a lot of MSPs, email security is not a growth area. It's not particularly a sexy sell. So one of the things that we've tried to do to support our partners is we want email security to be a growth area for you. We want you to be able to go out and land more customers. And so because it only takes 30 seconds to set us up, 7 clicks, 8 clicks if you've got a pop-up blocker, you get any time you set up a customer, it's got a 14-day POC for you to try out, and you can get full access to the product. It will be one of the simplest sales motions you take. So there's only 3 steps to selling our product. The first one is to engage, go to an MX record, look up on your customers, find out which seg they're using. Once you've, we'll go into step 2 and step 3. Once you've done the MX record lookup, roll out the POC. Takes 30 seconds, 7 clicks, 8 clicks if you've got a pop-up blocker. You can roll it out in monitoring only, which means that you can leave a gateway or Microsoft in play and put us in as that last stop before the inbox in monitoring only, and we will show you everything that they're missing because we're that last stop. If it gets to us, they didn't stop it. 14 days is what the proof of concept is. In 2024, our MSPs had an 87% conversion rate of POCs. They converted over 11,000 customers. It was bonkers. It was amazing. And the average sales cycle for them was about 11 days. So it's a huge growth opportunity. And one of the cool things for our MSP partners is that when you run this POC, you go into the portal, you generate a security checkup report, which will go through. It's about a 7-page PDF, which goes through the types of attacks, who's your top attacked users, spam, email. Phishing. We recently introduced Greymail to see how much time the VIPs are having to spend dealing with just marketing stuff. But it's co-branded. It's got your branding on it. So you go out and you run this 14-day POC that only takes you 30 seconds, 7 clicks, 8 clicks if you've got a pop-up blocker to set up, generate this co-branded report, and you take it to your customer. And you say, this is what we could have stopped in the last 2 weeks if we'd had this in play. And one of the cool things that we've done is we're pretty confident in this. And so for MSPs who are wanting to try, we have this promotion that we've been running out over the last 12 months where give us a try. And if we don't catch more than your existing secure email gateway, I will give you a PlayStation 5 for wasting your time. Or an Apple Watch. It used to be an Apple Watch, but we decided that a lot of MSPs wanted a PlayStation instead of an Apple Watch. Because we're very, very confident in our ability to catch more. And as I said, we catch more. It means that there's a better profitability for you in your services. And then we want to help you increase your sales as well through this simple playbook.
Let me touch on one thing here that's as nice as the demonstration, sort of the value of the service. Like I've found that email security is a little bit like the overall MSP business, which is if you're doing an exceptional job, you're very transparent. Like if people don't see you, your clients, they don't hear from you, everything works, there's no complaints. It's a little bit like that email security. If it does a really, really, really good job, then things just work. And people like the brain has a wonderful way of adapting. So if there is no problem, then there is no problem. They forget there ever was one. So I think it's important for a good email security product like Avanan to be able to demonstrate that value, and that those reports that you're talking about, that I think are a key component to showing that, yes, it's going well. Like, yes, you have fewer things that are getting through to your inbox, but that's because we're doing a good job as an MSP and we have that value.
That's exactly right. And particularly with that new feature I mentioned around Greymail protection, being able to generate a report with your branding as an MSP on it, that actually says, hey, I saved your VIPs 5 hours this month by stopping marketing stuff getting to them that they didn't want to see. That's value that they don't expect, that they're going to really appreciate. So as I said, 3 key things we're going to focus on as we partner. We're going to try and improve your security and reduce risk. We're going to do that through a high catch rate by the threat intel from the threat cloud. We're going to reduce your TCO by having the higher catch rate, but also by fully augmenting Defender for 365 and reduce the amount of time your techs spend on email. And then running that 3-step sales motion, we're going to try and increase your profit and your margin so you can go out and land more customers. Because, and I didn't put this in the slide, in 2023, Forrester said that email security is entering a golden age after stagnating for the best part of a decade. So there has never been a better time to build a business based off managed email security services, because there's so much low-hanging fruit in the market.
And it's time to show that as an MSP, I would want to show that I'm in front of it, not sort of trying to catch up.
Yeah. So, look, I as I mentioned, I come from an MSP background. I know I'm a salesperson, but I do come from an MSP background, and so the proof is always in the pudding. Please try it out. We have, and Guillaume's can talk about it, but we have NFRs. You can roll out as many 14-day POCs as you want from the portal. If you want to go roll it out to all of your customers, you can do that from our portal. That's fine. But just try it, see what's getting through, and then generate this co-branded report for your customers.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I'll take that as a very apt transition. Like, I think that's one of the key components. Buying Avanan at Sherweb means a few things, but I'll come back to this sales motion, like to this proof of concept motion, because I think it is absolutely key, and really giving MSP something that if they don't take advantage of it, like I'd be very surprised. Like I think it's really something that if you know it exists and it's available, you'll really want to take advantage. As for most of our products, like, you guys are our partners, you know this, but high quality onboarding and support, whether directly from us or from Avanan, like, we have a close relationship. We'll collaborate together and make sure that you understand the products and you can use it. It is very straightforward. I think that's one of his biggest selling points. So getting you to a bit of an expert level and being able to do what you want to do with the solution, very easy. We have good pricing, good competitive pricing. That's often the last part of the conversation, but as we know, like, nobody likes to pay money for nothing. So good competitive price. We will, like, that's part of my responsibility. We're very competitive with the people that you would expect us to be competitive with. So come talk to us about your pricing and we'll figure it out. And then it is part of our automated products, meaning that you buy it from us, you get access to the full console, you do whatever you need to do, you create your organization everything in the Avanan console, and they get automatically resynced with us, and then the billing's automated, everything is automated. I don't want to there are some exceptions, but we try to avoid manual products completely now at Sherweb, and we've been pretty successful this last year in doing that. So Avanan is one of those products, like, we believe is going to scale. It's going to be lots of demand. So we automated everything, make sure it was as easy as possible. The other thing is, you guys have been very clear. You want to have full access to the portal. You want to be able to do your own business and do what you want to do with the technical product. So you have that here. How to get started, we talked about it. So free trial, NFR. I think that's sort of the simpler way to say it. Remember our new activation process for vendor around the vendor management. So you can create the account for yourself, see the portal, go access it. There's a video here. When you get the presentation, you'll have the ability to click, but so we have demos and things like that on the activation process. Before we get to the QA, I just want to reiterate. If your client, all clients are trying to get, whatever it is, like prospective client, current client, if you're using a gateway-based solution, you can activate Avanan without having to change anything from your client. You don't have to remove it. You don't have to reconfigure it. You don't even have to look at it. The other thing is, you don't have to pay to do that proof of concept. With the 14-day trial built in, with the NFR built in, you have the ability to do this test without any financial impact to your company. So why not have a look? Like, I think that's the sort of we'd like to do a lot more with you around Avanan, but at a minimum, why not give it a shot? Even for your own organization as an MSP, I think personally that's where I would start, is I would try it on my own organization, activate it through a 14-day trial, and see what else it blocks. Like, what else? Like, what am I currently exposed to that I don't really have to be exposed to? To me, that's the best way to start. Once you're sold, I'm sure it'll be easy to sell it to your customers. We're up against time that was planned, but I'll have a look at the Q&A just for a sec if you allow me. So some people answered the question that I asked, which is nice. So of the people that are attending, only a few commented that they have full control of the DNS. This is something that happens often. If we have a question that people feel like it's not a good thing that If the no answer is not a good thing, they won't answer. So having just a few people say that they do have full control, I'm going to assume most of you don't. Not unusual, as you can see, probably the majority of people that are listening. But I think that when you're looking at a improved email security solution that doesn't require you to go through your customers one by one to change those things, like that's a major advantage. Somebody mentioned here, and I'll close on that, but somebody mentioned here that they do have full control of the DNS. They still don't want to transfer traffic to a gateway and then back and then do the same for outbound. Like even with the ability to do it, the choice is still to go through the APIs. So
yeah, we just I just saw that question. If you're happy for me to take it, centralized policy management across multiple customers is due in March. So we're about 6 weeks away. I spoke to our product manager on Monday, and he confirmed that. We also have to get updates on that. We run a monthly product update call. We release about 5 to 6 releases a month of new features. The vast majority of them we apply to existing customers for free. We don't charge additional for the vast majority of them. They don't become add-ons. So I would recommend getting access to that, registering on the Avanan website to the product updates page, because we, like I said, 5 to 6 a month. And here in 2025, we've just launched our new dedicated R&D team specific for MSP features. So I expect the MSP features to be coming hot and heavy and fast.
Thanks for answering that. I'll repeat the question just to make sure everybody understood, because you went straight to the answer.
Sorry about
Josh was asking us, is there the ability to manage multiple policies across multiple tenants at once? And just to sum up, the answer from David is March. So in March, that feature is on the roadmap to come out, and you're invited to the basically to the user webinar to see what's new and what's coming out all the time, because as a cloud company, rapid change of pace, especially in security, you got to keep up. Like we said, if you're using a solution that doesn't seem to be moving more than like once a year, then you got to ask some hard question about, are they staying on top of what they need to stay on top of? So before we go, all right. Usually we have an end slide, no end slide. Get in touch with your account representative. If you don't have an account representative, you could just get in touch with our sales department. So either sales@sherweb.com or partners@sherweb.com. If you have an account representative, you can contact them, and they have all the information already to get you started here. We'll be waiting for you, your question, your request, any feedback that you have about the product. David for sure has been looking, sort of asking for it. So we're looking forward to be able to provide more of that feedback. David, I want to thank you for joining us. Very much appreciate the collaboration between Avanan and Sherweb. Looking forward to more of these.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.